Listen-only mode.
I'd like to welcome you to this webinar today. My name is Bill Baker with Firestorm. Today we're going to be talking about time is not on your side. Our presenter today is Karen Masullo, and we're going to talk about the timeliness and the importance of time and responding. We'd also like you to become our friend on Facebook, Firestorm Solutions. On Twitter, we're known as Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risks and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We would like to remind you that the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and this work product should be discussed in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. Please do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. This webinar series is underwritten by our good friends at RenWeb. RenWeb has been a host and co-sponsor of this series for several years now, and this is part of the monthly Crisis Coach webinar series. You can go to firestorm.com and you can watch past webinars, and you can register for future webinars that occur on a monthly basis. We're delighted to have Karen Masullo, Firestorm's Chief Intelligence Officer and Executive Vice President, with us. Karen has extensive experience in training, social media, and all those other kind of wonderful things that we'd like to know about. And Karen is going to explain it to us. Karen, over to you, please.
Thank you, Bill. Whenever you say and all those wonderful things, I start singing. These are a few of my favorite things in my head. So thank you for that. That's a nice thing. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. That was Bill Baker. Bill is our VP of Operations at our corporate office and our moderator for all things webinar. He's also recording this session for us today. So when we are complete, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch this and other past recordings. In a couple of hours, you'll receive an email from GoToWebinar. It'll have the link in it. Additionally, in about 24 hours or so, we will have a brief of this session on our website. You can go to firestorm.com under Resources and Briefs, and you'll see it there. We have a wealth of resources for you, by the way. So just go to the Resources tab on our navigation menu, and there are papers and briefs and webinars and all kinds of fun stuff. I want to thank you for joining us today. I know for many of you this is spring break, and so your attending today shows your dedication to making sure your organizations are prepared and are able to be predictive rather than reactive, and we admire and appreciate that. We also want to thank our friends at RenWeb for not only underwriting this session, but because of your relationship or future relationship with RenWeb, and because you are on this session, we do have a few things that we want to make sure you understand are available to you. The first is, as a part of our Crisis Coach and Crisis Stop approach to assisting schools across the country, you have the availability of someone at Firestorm for 1 hour should you bump into a crisis in your career. So pick up the phone, call us, and we will be all hands on deck to assist you for an hour and hopefully develop a future relationship. But we want to be able to help you manage your crisis now, today, when it happens. The next step is to assist you if you would like to follow up on past pieces of conversation and direction that we've discussed since the beginning of the year. So in January, we sort of looked back at 2016, and we talked in February about benchmarking. And along with benchmarking comes, how do you assess your threat? How do you do a simple high-level threat assessment? So we have a self-guided one that we do with you. It's an hour-long conversation. Normally it's $2,500 fee. We waive that for you because of your relationship with RenWeb. So give us a call. Again, Bill Baker's on the other end, myself, of webinars at firestorm.com. Just pop us an email, and we'll be happy to assist you in any way we can with scheduling that assessment. And the last is our behavioral risk threat assessment program. Many of you at RenWeb conferences have heard Jim Satterfield speak, and he wants to make sure that you know that we are going to present you with a license to use BRSA, to be trained, to train your people in how to use our behavioral risk threat assessment program and all the components of it for 1 year at no license. And we're going to waive the license for the first year. So that's my gift to you today. Happy spring, and let's spring forward, because when minutes matter, seconds count. And what we're talking about today is what happens when you are in the midst of a crisis and need to get communication out. We're going to talk about why you need to get communication out, if indeed you do need to get communication out, and what we want that communication to say, who it's directed to. And again, we're going to ask that question, why, an awful lot. So many of you are sitting in conference rooms right now. Some of you have just had lunch. Some of you have just had breakfast. Some of you may have just had a cocktail. I'm not sure what part of the country you're in. But if you're sitting around with your team, I want you all to think about the last time you all had a crisis. And when that crisis hit, no matter the type of crisis, whether it was you had a school bus breakdown, or you had a fire in a lab during class time. We actually had that happen. We had a student who thought it was really funny to post it on Instagram, and thousands of people saw this fire in this classroom before the students, before the administration of the school was aware of it. So that's always fun. So think about the last time you had a crisis, and think about the characteristics of that crisis, because we can tell you that we know some of the characteristics of that crisis included the fact that almost everything you learned in the first hour was incorrect or sort of only half right. Because that's what happens in a crisis, right? You only get bits and pieces of information. You get them from different people, and you try to piece together what that most common thread of information is, especially if you're not getting information from an official spokesperson, from law enforcement or from medical or first responder personnel. So, for instance, should something happen, say, on your football field before the school day, you have different people's perception of what just occurred. And you need to become a police officer yourself and help your witnesses give you information. But you're only going to get bits and pieces of everyone's perception of information. So we have to be very careful how we message. We have a client that recently had what seemed to be on the surface a relatively simple piece of communication that had to go out. The issue was that, as you know, for many of you in different parts of the country, we've had some pretty severe weather the last couple of days. And for this particular school system, when the weather came through, some power lines were taken out, and I'm sorry, I just got an emergency message. But power lines were taken out, and the school had to decide, one of the schools lost power, and they had to decide whether to conduct school that day or not. So they put out a communication that was meant to be an internal communication, and in that communication, they said that a tree, at approximately 5 a.m. in the morning, a tree came down, and that they were trying to decide whether to have school or not. Well, that internal communication, as every internal communication you make from now until the end of time will be someone shared it on Facebook. It's going to happen. You know that, right? So be clear in your communication. So they shared this on Facebook, and someone on Facebook who has a very large following and is involved in a city council position in some way or another got a hold of that message and said, not is the school going to be closed or open, but what time did the tree fall down? Because where we live, we lost power at 1 a.m. But you're saying that the tree came down at 5 a.m. How is that possible? All right, so for everyone on the call, when we sit and look at this objectively, we can all say the tree doesn't really have anything to do with anything. The tree is not important. But because that detail that was not verified was put into the communication, it suddenly becomes an important piece of the communication. We don't want that to happen. What happened then was, who told you the tree came down at 5 a.m.? Law enforcement. When did law enforcement tell you that? When we spoke. When did we speak? Suddenly, there are far more questions to answer than there needed to be to a simple communication. So let's use that as a good lesson, because we know there are very specific attributes to a crisis. First of all, there is an escalating flow of events. Events change. That's Roxy the Wonder Dog saying hello to you. Events change as more facts are uncovered and known. We know this. The media must work in this way, right? As a crisis unfolds and more details are known, especially in the case of when there's a person of interest, we know that we see the media saying, breaking on this update, more details emerge in the case of blah, blah, blah. And as more details emerge in the case of whatever it may be, your crisis suddenly is in the spotlight once again. And MEPS or some of that information may be insufficient or inaccurate. So not only are there updates to your crisis that keep it in the spotlight, but it may continually have incorrect information associated with it. You are then under intense scrutiny. You may be under intense scrutiny by your board, by your alumni, by your parents, by your students, by your community, by the businesses and the other organizations near and around you. And you're experiencing a loss of command and control. And that's the most important thing in a crisis, right? Command and control. Who's in charge? Who's the leader? Who's giving directions? And do we trust the person who is in command? It's so important to remember, and I think we say this almost every webinar, how you respond to your original crisis can create a secondary crisis for your organization. We're going to look at some examples of that, not specifically for schools, but in any way, any organization at any time, without careful planning, your first response to an original crisis can create a secondary crisis. And your brand and reputation for your school is going to be under attack. Your alumni may say, why am I supporting this organization? They don't seem to understand that resiliency and preparedness are brand attributes. When I'm selecting a school for my child, I'm going to select a school that practices what it preaches. And I'm going to see that through their messaging, not through marketing, but through their messaging, especially in times of crisis, because every crisis is a human crisis. It's critical that we remember that there are students, our teachers, our employees, volunteers, vendors, customers, people who use our facilities and our campus, parents, city, county, other officials, and our community at large that trust in the schools to be transparent, clear, and concise in messaging, especially in times of crisis. Because while it is not true, silence is perceived as guilt. And if you are someone who is in command, who has a record of solid leadership, it's not silence then, it's careful reflection. It means you're taking a moment or an hour to gather the facts so that you can respond in an appropriate manner that helps people become clarified about the situation. You are there to restore order, not to incite chaos by chaotic responses. So let's look at just a couple of situations that we've seen in the news. They're not specific to schools, but they're interesting in that they have what I call the "that would never happen to us" factor. How many of you are sitting there with each other right now, look at each other, you know who you are, and have said or heard in the hallways of your hallowed institutions, "Nobody would ever do that here. Our people aren't that crazy"? Well, we cannot predict human behavior. What we can do is predict what might happen and plan for it. We saw at the Academy Awards this year something that should have been a very simple exercise become something embarrassing and somewhat comical. And that was that the accounting firm of PricewaterhouseCoopers had one job to do that they have done for years and years and years at the Academy Awards. They have this envelope and they have that envelope. This person won or this person won. Maybe there are 4 envelopes. I'm not sure, but there aren't a lot. And they have to make sure that the right envelope is delivered to the right person, and they got it wrong. I also have to think that there's a contingency plan for that simple activity. So I think to myself, okay, we have like 4 envelopes, maybe 5. We got to make sure we give the right one to the person. What could go wrong? We could lose an envelope or 2. All right, what happens if we lose an envelope or 2? Let's make sure we have backup envelopes somewhere. We could burn the envelopes. All right, let's make sure we have backup envelopes somewhere. We could accidentally give them the wrong envelope. No, that would never happen. I can bet you today that PwC has a backup plan for when somebody has the wrong envelope. Now, the next situation, please do not think that I'm in any way trying to be fallacious. I want to, however, drive home the point of when you think it'll never happen here, it will. This was it's a very sad story. Visitors Bureau had a great social media presence, and they had a great person doing not only social media but other activities for the Visitors Bureau. She was a director, 61-year-old person who accidentally one night uploaded a personal adult content video to what she thought was her husband's account, and sadly it was to the Visitors Bureau Instagram account. And sadly it was at night, no one saw it, and it went viral. And it was a very, very upsetting situation for everyone involved. We have a hard and fast rule at Firestorm. We do not message corporate messaging on personal devices. We keep our personal and our business devices separate. Is it a little bit more work? Yes. But it keeps us professional in how we message to you because we know you count on accurate messaging from us. So we don't want to confuse anything that may be personal with what's professional. We ask and we think and we train that you do the same with your teams. And then we've seen other situations where we know where the buck stops. We know how quickly bad news travels today. And we know that someone is going to be demanded to be held accountable. In this specific instance, this is really quite upsetting to a lot of people, no matter what side of the political fence you may be on. I think we can see that there's a disturbing trend we've all seen through the campaign and since the end of the campaign, where there's been a vitriol, especially on social media. You see it on Twitter and Facebook, etc. And we have public officials using these channels in ways that have never been used before. That has created an interesting phenomena and of really vitriolic types of message that we see. And in this one, after the State of the Union address, where there was a 2-minute standing ovation to pay homage to the sacrifice made by a soldier and his family, and she was given this ovation. Dan Grillo posted, "Sorry, Owen's wife, you're not helping yourself or your husband's memory by standing there and clapping like an idiot. Trump just used you." So let's say you wake up the next morning and find out this is your employee in your school administration, in your classroom, who has sent a message like this. Are you prepared? You may have your conversation with the employee, and you may take care of that situation. But CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and whomever else is out there is going to be not ringing on your phone, but they're going to be knocking at your door. They're going to be talking to your students, your parents, your board. Are you prepared for that? Do you have messages ready? Do you have access to your social media accounts so that you can manage the message post-event? Do you have any idea who has access to your social media accounts? Is that person on vacation? Is there a backup to that person with the username and password so that you can get in there and message? How much time did we just waste trying to figure out who has the passwords to the Twitter account? That's the type of thing that must be established ahead of time, and you must be at least 3 deep. If you are the head of your school, the principal, how quickly can you get a message out on social media? And do you have the right tool in place so that you can message out from one application to all of your properties? You know you work with a great company that helps you with notification and management through RenWeb. How about through your social channels? Are you working as efficiently as possible in that regard? And if you don't know where that information is, just do yourself a great favor after this webinar and get that information. Share it with one other person so that you have a backup to the backup to the backup. And you'll feel better, and so will I. Now, this person was released from their position, but this company, their phone lines went down. They were inundated. They had death threats because of one stupid social comment that someone made. And again, we know that there is a real financial impact when significant mistakes or challenges are experienced and not handled in a way that is perceived to be competent. Now, we may not be the Yahoo CEO, and we may not be about to lose $142 million or whatever it is in stock and bonuses. But what if we lose the support of one parent who was helping us supply uniforms to our students, or was helping us move forward an important project that benefits our students? What if we lose the faith of someone who's important to our organization? That's what we want to avoid, and that's why we want to lead from the front with confident communication. As an aside, I recommend this book to you. I was doing some research on 2 articles that I had written last year, 2 separate ones, not last year, the year before, on 2 separate instances of what we're talking about. Very small organizations that were suddenly put into a national spotlight, actually an international spotlight, because of thoughtless actions by their employees. And John Ronson, in his book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, talks about this new phenomena. In the past, when someone did something wrong on social media, and wrong is an elusive term, but or objective, there was sort of this idea that the crowd loved to kind of follow the fail. And everybody would jump on and say, ha, 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 that person failed. Look at that fail. And a little hashtag. There was the fail well on Twitter that was used for all of these different things to show someone had messed up. And people got tired of just mocking people who had failed. And so we've seen a phenomena where now they are not only mocked but shamed. We have created this virtual scarlet letter now that is a great lesson to our students. The story of at least just the 2 women that I'm talking about, plus the many others in this book, follows what has happened to their lives since then. Their inability to find employment, the impact that's had on their families, the communities they had once served. So it's a good read, it's a good book, and it's a good word of caution for all of us. All right, I want to share with you something from Forbes. If you weren't paranoid before, Forbes is going to help us become a little bit more concerned. This has to do with leadership in general, and while it's geared toward business, I think we can look at it from the school point of view as well. 10 leadership blind spots, and basically what I took from this little infograph was, man, we can't trust anyone or anything. Don't trust that you know who to trust. Don't trust the wisdom of the crowd. Don't trust the maximizers. Don't trust the minimizers. Don't trust the stars. Don't trust branding. Don't trust big data. Don't trust experts. Do not trust your instincts. Don't trust your strategy alone. And do not trust your ability to control the message. Now, we're going to do everything we can to control the message. We're going to keep it as clear and concise as possible. But do not trust that in this day and age, somebody's not going to take part of what you say out of context and create a fake news website out of it that, frankly, is almost impossible to fight. These things happen in the world we live in now. We just have to be very careful to pattern excellence in behavior and excellence in communication. So how are we going to do that? It is a nuanced thing. It demands preparation. Samuel Clemens once wrote a letter to a friend, and he apologized in the beginning of the letter. He said, I want to apologize for the long, poorly written letter, but I didn't have time to write a good short one. So we're going to talk about that same thing in the next few minutes. We're going to talk about taking the time to write good, short pieces of communication that are appropriate for a variety of audiences and a variety of medium. We are going to be careful with language because the difference between the almost right word and the right word is really a very large matter. It's the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning. I want you to think about being prepared as a time machine, but I want you to envision that time machine not as something from Wells that takes you back in time, but think of it like an ATM where you can go and buy some time. Because if you've ever been in a crisis, you know that the one thing you wish you had more of was time. And I've never met anyone who went through a crisis that didn't wish they had had more time to prepare. Because confusion costs time. There is an exercise you can go through, and it's troubling, but it's important for some people to go through. And that is, do a Google search for 911 calls from the, let's say, the UPS store shooting, depot shooting a couple years back, or any others where a violent act occurred. Prepare yourself because these are disturbing calls. But it's very important to listen and learn. Sometimes you hear a very calm person, someone who's very calm in the midst of the confusion and the crisis, but more often than not, you're going to hear chaos in the background. I don't know what to do. I don't know what just happened. We have injured people here. I've never taken CPR. What should I do? I don't know if there's still a shooter in the area. Where should we go? Should we hide? When are the police coming? You're still going to have that confusion if you are prepared, but you're going to have more clarity, more time to think because you've already done some of the rote things that are required to be done in a crisis. Your plans and your message maps and your training and all of that become your time machine. These plans are designed to buy you time when you need it the most, because when these seconds matter, police arrive in minutes. We don't have time machines. We don't have quantum technology where suddenly the police can appear on your property. So there's going to be a period of time where you need to buy calm. By identifying your risks, developing your plans, by training your people and exercising those plans, this is going to buy you time when everybody needs it the most. You know, something that Firestorm has done, and I'm very proud to be associated with Firestorm because they're really quite groundbreaking in what we've done. A couple of years ago, Jim Satterfield identified a need to help some of our organizations create tabletop exercises in a virtual way because of budget, time, and resource constraints. So 6 times a year, Firestorm conducts a virtual stress test. And we don't have thousands of people attend. We have thousands of companies, schools, and organizations just like your own attend. We've had people send us pictures of themselves gathered around conference rooms going through our exercise, 2-hour virtual exercise. Last month, we had our first of the year. We conducted an exercise on the risks of live streaming and tools like Facebook Live and YouNow and Periscope and others. If you don't know about these or you missed it, you can download the paper from our website or pop me an email at webinars@firestorm.com. I'd be happy to talk to you about some of those risks. This next one coming up is on cyber breach. It's on April 6th from 2 to 4. So gather your teams together and we will help you at no cost stress test your team so that you can identify your strengths and your weaknesses and where and how you need to tighten up your team and move forward. And we do this because we want to make sure that we meet your 4 M's of message management. You understand your message and your messaging when it needs to go out. You understand how the media is going to interact with that message. There's going to be someone, there's an informal coach in your life. It could be a coworker, it could be your principal, your assistant principal, or someone in a leadership position in your school. It could be your mother. And your mom gets on the phone and says, honey, I see that crisis you're going through. You need to get out in front of the media and talk to these people about this. We have questions. We don't want you to think that you can get out there and just control the media, because that's just not the way it works. Not without planning and care. And even with planning and care, it can go wrong. So you must monitor what happens before and after, and then understand how to measure the data that you're seeing, the metrics of your message, to see if people are comprehending what you're talking about and receiving what it is you want your message to be. We want to avoid the pitfalls through message mapping by continually asking, why are we communicating about this now? And are we communicating about the right things? Are we talking about our school closing? Are we talking about a tree? Are we talking about the power lines? Are we talking about keeping our students safe? Which one is it? So, when you start preparing messages with your team, everybody sit down, buy a pizza or something healthier, or buy a healthy pizza. Sit down, and the first thing we do is we prepare a list of stakeholders who are going to receive our message. And that stakeholder community may vary with the type of event. So if we have a communicable illness event where 70% of our student body isn't attending school, or we have an event, let's say, I hate to even envision any event, but an alternate event, let's just say. Let's say we have a lightning strike on school grounds or something like that. We have two different groups of people we're talking to. We have a medical community we may need to bring in the first. And the second, we have that as well, but maybe it's a different member of the medical community. We have parents, we have concerned parents, we have students, but they have different interests. We may have football boosters that have concerns suddenly that are different from the ones that would be in the communicable illness. So prepare your list of stakeholders, and remember, your stakeholders include students, their parents or guardians, employees, your teachers, anyone else employed by your school or your school district, your vendors, visitors to your property that may be there because you do business with them in some way. You also may have clients or customers, people who rent buildings or rooms on your campus, people who use your campus for philanthropic or charitable events. You have partnerships in the community. You have relationships in the community with officials, with your local law enforcement and other first responders. So make a list of all of these different groups of people, and then again identify, why are we communicating with these people? So why are we communicating with our students? Well, we want to keep our students safe. We want to make sure all of our students are safe and that they don't put themselves at risk through any action while this is an ongoing situation and afterwards. With parents, we need to communicate with parents because all of the students are going to be over here in this location, and we don't want all the parents jumping in their cars and rushing to our location. They're not going to be able to get through because the media is all over, because there are police cars all over, because it's a dangerous situation, because we have a gas leak. So we need to communicate effectively so that we know that parents are not suddenly rushing to our location. And you do this for each group. Think about how quickly you would have to get that message out to parents. Do not come rushing toward our location. They could complicate the situation and make it more dangerous. Then address their risk perception and fear factors. The first thing they're thinking is, oh my God, is my child safe? What happened? I'm afraid. You need to address that, but you need to address it in an honest way. And you cannot release confidential information you do not know to be true or that has not been confirmed and verified by law enforcement, and then the families or those involved have been notified. One of the most disturbing things to me in my years of doing this was when there was a shooting at Chardon High School in Ohio, and the names of the victims were released on Twitter by a student before the families had been notified. The poor student who released those names had no idea what she was doing. She was just speculating and talking about what happened. Media glommed onto that immediately, and her Twitter feed was inundated by major news networks saying, can we use this? Can we interview you? Can you call us right now? It was very disturbing and some very difficult lessons learned by that young person. And so once you've identified who your stakeholders are and what their fears and concerns and points of view may be, you can then prepare clear and concise messages that are targeted to them. You want to address their questions and concerns based on whatever scenario you start with, the impact from the scenario, and your messaging, messages 1, 2, and 3. And the reason we do 1, 2, and 3 is because there are going to be follow-up questions. So if you have, let's say, a recall of a specific food type from your facility because of contamination, you may be ready for that first question. What happened? Well, there was a recall and we removed the food from our cafeteria and no students were injured. You may not, however, be ready for that second question, and this is where people get tripped up. This is where people think, I got this, I can wing this. But without preparation, how many of you on the phone right now could handle the second question of, how long have you been poisoning our children, and why didn't you do something about it sooner? I don't know about you, but I'd get a little defensive if somebody asked me that question. And as soon as I did, I would lose control of the conversation. So we message map to address things we know could happen. We know at some point we might have to close school early or close school for a day we had not planned on. We know that we're going to run drills. We may have a shelter-in-place drill. We may have an unannounced lockout or lockdown. We should have messages ready for that in case there's an unscheduled event that we have to communicate out to parents. It would be a lot easier if we could quickly communicate that. And any other school-place incidents that might occur. What if there's an injury? What if there's a sports injury? Let's go ahead and map those messages out now, not because we're going to use the exact message, but because in times of crisis, it's easier to edit than it is to create. Always remember the story Jim Satterfield told about when he was the CEO of a company during 9/11. And a bunch of them got together in a conference room and said, you know, we really need to let our employees know that they can go home if they need to go home. They have children they need to talk to about this event. They may have relatives that are traveling. Let's tell them if they need to go home, they can. And so the very freaked out human resource person who was just as upset as the rest of us watching that horror went back to her office and quickly sent an email that said, if you want to live, leave. And she was devastated because she accidentally sent an email that said, if you want to live, leave, instead of sending an email that said, if you want to leave, leave. So she added the secondary crisis of concern to that first crisis and really scared a lot of people. So make sure you have your stakeholders, your questions, their concern, and your key messages with supporting factual information mapped out ahead of time to assist you in times of crisis. We want to enable you to deliver clear and timely messages in a variety of manners to a variety of audiences, news conferences, social media, through press releases. And we want you to be able to do this in a concise way so that when there is misinformation out there, you can address that and correct it and make sure that everybody is living off the same facts. We want you to create a mature organization where you have a culture that is strategic, where everyone is clear on guidelines, communication, responsibilities, activities during a crisis, and timely, mature responses. I've taken a couple of minutes more than I should have today, so I want to thank you very much for joining us again during what I believe is spring break for most of you. You can contact us at any time via our website at firestorm.com. You can reach out to the lovely Bill Baker, who is moderating this call at webinars at firestorm.com, and make an appointment or just chat with us or ask us questions, and we'll help you align your crisis communication plan with best practices. We want you to develop strategies for all media outlets. Remember, if there's only one thing you do today after listening to this is go find out who has the Twitter account and make sure that you're 3 deep in coverage in case you ever need to use social media for messaging. And if you don't own your Twitter accounts, please go make sure that you do. And finalize your crisis communication plan with clear, concise message maps. If you just meet once a month at the end of the year, you'll have at least 10 good scenarios and message maps so that if you need them in 2018, you'll have them. And then contact us for support at any time. You should analyze your insurance and stress test your plan on April 6th from 2 to 4. We have easy access for you for our briefs. You'll receive a memo from GoToWebinar with a link to our briefs and recordings. And again, it's been our pleasure, as always, to partner with RenWeb, a fax company, and our longtime partner in helping make sure that you're prepared. Thank you so much for joining us today. This will conclude our session. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining, and goodbye.